Okay, so good evening. We'll continue our halach discussions on Hilchos Shabbos. We're at the end of the chapter of Shia Chazara ve'Hatmana. We're now at the stage of delving deeper and more broadly into the Hatmana situation. So what's Hatmana? We mentioned last week, but I'll just review quickly. Hatmana means to cover the pot, hot pot that has in it food, to cover it from all sides, from all directions, with a towel, with a cloth of any type, in any way. Now, we said like this, before Shabbat, on Friday, before Shabbat comes in, you're allowed to cover with something that's a no mosif hevel, meaning that the item you're covering it with doesn't add heat on its own. It just isolates the pot from getting colder. It protects the pot from getting colder. That's allowed before Shabbat. Now, even if it's on the plata, which definitely exterminates heat, exonerates heat as it's on, it's always heating up the pot. But that's not the cover. The cover is what you place on top of the pots to cover them. Besides being on the plata, those covers usually don't extract heat. They're cold. They themselves are cold. They just create insulation for the pot from the cold air so that you keep warm. On the other hand, since you're covering it and underneath is the plata, hot plate, so actually this entire situation now is adding more heat all the time to the pot because the pot is generating heat all the time. So what is this considered? The answer is like this. Most poskim hold that is considered a tmana b'davar hamosif hevel, meaning you're covering the pot with something that altogether adds heat all the time to the pot, to the food, which you cannot even do before Shabbat. Before Shabbat, we said you can only cover with stuff that doesn't add heat. But if it adds heat, you mustn't do so, even on Friday. But since there's one posek, the Maharam Chaviv, who decided that since the additional heat coming from the plata is not from the cloth that's covering the pot, rather it's from the surface, which isn't part of the hatmana of the whole pot, therefore it's not considered a mosif hevel. The cover now is not considered that it's adding heat, generating heat, because it doesn't come from the cover itself, it's coming from underneath. So we rely on the Maharam Chaviv to allow both Ashkenazim and Sephardim to allow covering your pots even totally before Shabbat, because it's still considered b'davar she'eino mosif hevel. You're covering it with something that doesn't add heat. During Shabbat, you mustn't even cover totally any pot or food or of any type, totally even with something that doesn't add heat. It's cold, but it's isolating the pot, that's hot pot, that's itself already a problem. So even if you take it off the plata and it's a hot pot, you want to now take it to some neighbor, or you're invited over to someone for Shabbos for the daytime meal, when we used to go visit one another's. Hopefully soon we'll get back to doing so. So you're invited somewhere for Shabbat daytime meal, and you want to bring along some food you made for that meal, and it's hot. You want to keep it hot. So you remove it from the plata, and you wrap it all around with a towel. And you want to take it this way to your neighbor, to the family, to your host. You mustn't do so. You're not allowed to do so. Because by wrapping it all around from all sides, you're doing hatmana. Even though it's b'davar she'eino mosif hevel, the towel is not adding any heat. It's just preserving the heat, keeping it hot inside. It's still not allowed, because during Shabbat, you cannot cover from all sides, even something that doesn't add any heat. Before Shabbat, you'll be allowed to do so, but not during. And definitely not definitely you mustn't do what the Maram and Chaviv considered a devar she'no mosif hevel by the plata underneath and covering it on top, because you can't do that just because you're covering it with something, even if you don't consider it adding heat. Doesn't matter. You're not allowed to even cover with something that doesn't add heat on Shabbat. So it mustn't be done whatsoever, and especially since all other poskim hold that covering something totally on top of a plata is considered as if you're covering with something that's adding heat all the time, mosif hevel, which is definitely wrong totally even before Shabbat, but we allow the plata, but not during Shabbat. Okay, so that's the issue of Hatmana. Now,
hey, sorry, Rabbi.
Yes, sure, yes.
Does it make any difference if you have the timer on or not?
Right, no difference. No difference. What do you mean? If you have the timer on, then during the time that it's off, you want to cover?
Right, if everything is still off, Friday morning, Shabbat morning, you want to put everything on, everything is off, you just laid it on and you cover it with a blanket.
Ah, okay, wait, I misunderstood. So everything is cold at the moment? The pots
Yes, the element is still off, like your schnitzel, your potatoes, everything is cold.
And now you would like to cover it. No, so cold food you definitely are allowed to cover, even totally from all sides. It has to be that the food, that the pot, pan, or whatever it's in, is hot, that you mustn't cover from all sides, even with something that's not adding any heat. But in your case, it's all cold food. Cold, you're allowed to cover from all sides. Even if it helps you keep it sort of warm because it's isolating from the cold air that's in the room, it's still allowed because the pot and the food inside is cold. But the moment the plata or the hot plate goes on, the timer sets it to go on, then you mustn't have it that way, because by Hatmana, this is different than bishul. Bishul, we said, what counts is the moment you place it on the fire. That's what counts to be considered cooking. And if at that moment, like the example we gave, was if it was a congealed sauce, a gravy, that's now stiff, it's now considered solid, not a liquid, and you place it on the plata for it to heat up, and then it becomes a liquid, that's okay. We said en bishul achal bishul beyavesh is solid and was pre-cooked before Shabbat, and bishul achal bishul, and solids we said there's no problem of cooking after cooking. And since with the moment you place it on the hot plate, it's still solid, so it's considered a solid, which is no problem of bishul. Even though 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's all going to be liquid. And by liquid, we hold that there is bishul ha bishul, but we don't mind because we look at the moment it was done and not the later on development or consequence of your action. Here, by Hatmana, and same is true by Hashaya, keeping something on the plata for before Shabbat, here, it's not the action that we are only concerned about. We're concerned also of the fact that it's set up this way, even if it so happens to be after we finish the action itself. Like in your case, Leah, when the plata was cold, the food was cold, you covered it totally. Until now, that's fine. But the moment the timer goes on, it's now going to become hot and it's going to be covered totally. So the mere fact that it's situated this way, it's standing this way, which is covered from all sides, and there's heat coming from the bottom. So it's something hot that's covered from all sides. That's Hatmana. It mustn't be kept this way, even though you've done it when it was still okay to do. That's a major difference between Hatmana and bishul. Bishul is the action that counts. Hatmana is the whereabouts themselves, how it looks now, no matter when the action was done, covering. Therefore, you mustn't keep it covered when the timer sets it to go on. For Ashkenazim, it's very simple to solve all of this Hatmana issue. For Ashkenazim, all you need is to make sure that a little bit of the pot is peeking out of the cover. So let's say you're covering from the top, all the pots, but the sides are left open. Or even if it sort of folds over and covers partially the sides of the pots, that's still okay. Because as long as there's some visible, it has to be visible, not a teeny crack that's uncovered. That's not enough. It has to be a visible part that you could see easily. When you look at it, visible part of the pot is uncovered, that's enough already. That's both if there's heat underneath, if there's no heat. It doesn't matter. That's not a Hatmana according to Ashkenazi.
Can I ask a question, Rabbi? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Does that mean, for example, let's say you've got a pot or like a silver tray. Can the silver tray have tinfoil complete, like, you know, the like disposable ones that have their own lid, or can a pot have a lid on it? It means like that's allowed, but what we're talking about now is like an additional covering. Like presumably you can have a lid on a pot or a cover to a tray. Exactly.
Right. Very true. And I see that's what Juliet exactly asked on the chat. What about a lid? Exactly. Okay. So yeah, the answer is this. The Chazon Ish explains very beautifully. He says Hatmana, like you said exactly now, it's to do something extra. There's the way that we normally cook or normally display the food on the plata, warming drawer, blech, whatever it may be. The normal way is that it's in a container and there's a lid on top. We're not doing something extra to keep it warm. That's a normal way. By the way, at times, it's not only due to the, why do we cover our pots with the lid? It's not only to keep them hot, to keep the food hot, which is the main purpose, I would assume, but it's also to keep it clean. If you leave it uncovered, then you have all the bugs and flies falling in. Especially with the Ora's experience with all these animals. So we definitely want to cover everything so nothing should fall in. Dust, whatever it may be. So, and even if the main reason is to keep it hot, but that's the normal way we cook, the normal way we warm up things, that's fine. That's not considered Hatmana. You can cover those aluminum disposable pans with their cover, or even by oil, which you pre-cut before Shabbat, you can cover it up, because that's like a lid. What you cannot do is surround it again with another layer of aluminum foil, because the second layer is already extra that keeps it warm beyond the fact that you just want to shut the pan, the disposable, or whatever it may be.
Boss, just go away now, please, boss.
No, 9 days of absence, okay?
Okay. Fine. So that's for that. So, but on top of the lid, outside, that's
You already said this to me twice. Just go to sleep.
That's where you mustn't cover it once again. The pot and the lid. On top of that, you can't cover it again. So Ashkenazim allow leaving a certain section visible from the pot uncovered. Sfardim don't even allow that. Sfardim hold Hatmana b'nichtzat shma Hatmana. Even if it's covered a little bit, it's still considered Hatmana. So they can't cover their stuff on Shabbos day at all, even just not on top, because even a partially covered is not allowed for Sfardim. Nazim allowed. Okay. Now, another thing that we mentioned was that Hatmana is only when the surrounding cover is actually touching the pot from all sides. If it's somewhat away from the pot and surrounding, that's okay. That's why we're allowed to place the pot in the oven before Shabbat on Friday, even though the oven is hot and it's going into the oven and shutting the door so it's all covered from all sides, but the walls of the oven are not touching the pot. The pot there's some air, some space between the two. That's not Hatmana. It has to be that it's mamish, touching from all sides, all around. Okay. How about a situation where you want to cover a challah, let's say. You have a challah, and you want to wrap it with tin foil all around, and then place it on a plata. Not directly for those who hold that michzekin vashel, so you put some upside down plate or something, or it's on top of a pot that's on the plata, which is allowed then to warm up the challah. Are you allowed to do so, or is that considered hatmana? Because you've covered the challah surrounded with tinfoil from all sides. So truth of the matter, better if you don't do so, because of hatmana. Even though you may say that that's really more like a pot that's surrounding the food. We said a pot is allowed, including a lid. So that's my pot. The challah is now surrounded by tinfoil. That's its pot. So it really depends. It depends. If the reason you're covering it from all sides is in order to keep it clean, you're afraid of bugs, you're afraid of dust, dirt, all kinds of things like that, then you're right. Then it's okay. We would allow that. Because really your intention is not to keep it hot, rather to keep it clean and away from anything. So that's like a pot. Just make sure you're surrounding it only once with tinfoil and not double layer. If you do a double layer, then the second layer is definitely hatmana, because that's already not necessary for keeping it clean. Rather, it keeps it warm, and that's hatmana. So one layer of tinfoil. If your intention is really to keep it clean, that's okay. But most of us, if we do that, that's not our prime intention. That's our main intention. Our main intention is to keep it warm. And therefore, it is an issue. It is an issue of hatmana. Why is it not like a pot, which we allow, even with a lid? Because it doesn't need a pot. When you have some wet food, liquidy, or even sometimes dry, but a lot of pieces, so you need a pot to hold it all in. You need a lid and everything like we said before. But a challah doesn't really need a pot, because it's all one piece and it's not liquid. It doesn't need a pot. You can warm it up as is. So the fact that you're surrounding it with tin foil proves more so that you want it hot, more so than as a pot for food. So therefore, it's better yet if you can wrap it with tin foil, but leave a little bit of it exposed, unwrapped. And that makes it non-hatmana for Ashkenazim. Sephardim can't do that either. For Ashkenazim, it makes it possible because even a small section of the challah, which is uncovered, it takes away the problem of hatmana for Ashkenazim. Okay. Let's continue. Yes, now very important concept within hatmana. There is no such thing as hatmanat ochel be'ochel. Meaning, there's no problem to surround one food with another food, totally from all sides. For example, can one take a cooked egg, hard-boiled egg, and place it on Shabbat? It's obviously pre-cooked and it's yavesh, it's dry. Hard-boiled egg is dry. So there's en bishul ha bishul. So the point of view of bishul, no problem. Even if it's cold from the fridge, you can make it boiling hot if you'd like. Can you stick it into the chunt, like in, deep inside, and have it surrounded by the chunt now? So you get it brown and tasty. For those who like eggs in their chunt. Can you do so on Shabbat morning? The answer is yes. Why? Because there's no such thing as hatmanat ochel be'ochel. Food cannot create a problem of hatmanah, even if it surrounds a different food, totally from all sides. So therefore, you're allowed to stick it in. The only problem is if the chulg pot is directly on its heating surface, like in a crock pot, directly in the base of the crock pot, or it's on the plata, the chulg pot is on the plata, then by placing the egg in, you're doing michzekin vashel of the egg. It's like putting something directly on the plata to warm up on Shabbos morning, which most of us don't do. So if you would like to put that egg inside, you would need to lift up the pot, the chulent pot, from within the crock pot or from the plata, lift it up, put something underneath, so that now it doesn't rest directly on the plata, and then put the egg inside. As we normally do for anything that we want to warm up, we don't put it directly on the plata. So you lose a little bit of the heating effect by having to lift it up because you want to put that egg inside. Otherwise, it would have stayed completely inside. By the way, speaking about a crock pot already, if we got to that point, the very last psak of Reb Shlomo Zalman in his lifetime had to do with the crock pot. And it's a thrilling story that happened, a little bit unfortunate. Reb Shlomo Zalman was, even back then, 26 years ago. He passed away almost 26 years ago. Actually, wow, I just realized it was Kaf Adar, but Adar Aleph. The year he passed away 26 years ago was Adar Aleph. This year we don't have Adar Aleph, Adar Bet. So we commemorate Kaf Adar, but his passing away. But really, Kaf Shvat is the month-to-month year from when he passed away, because of Adar Rishon. So, and today is Kaf Aleph Shvat, entering Kaf Bet. So it's mamish to the day almost, 26 years ago. So even back then, they already had the crock pot available. I guess it was very, very brand new then. And someone came to him and asked the question whether the mere fact that the inner pot is surrounded by the external pot, which has the heat coming out, extracting the heat from it, generating heat into the inner pot, is that Hatmana? Because it's covered from all sides. True, the lid by a crock pot is only the lid. There's only a lid to the internal pot where the food is, and not the external pot which creates the heat. So you could say that it's surrounded from all sides except for the top. The top is exposed, although there's a lid, but that lid we said is not a tmana. That's okay. On top of the lid, no one places, as far as I know, we don't use a crock pot, but as far as I know, people don't cover the top of the crock pot besides the lid of the internal pot. No one adds another towel on top of that. If you do that, that's total atmana, no question. And that's even not allowed before Shabbat, because we said before Shabbat, we're not allowed to do atmana b'davar mosif heaven. We can't do atmana within something that adds heat. And the crock pot definitely adds heat. That's what it's meant to do. It's meant to cook, or at least keep warm.
Can I just check what you said? On a chulent pot, you're not allowed to put a towel or like a Shabbat cover over the chulent pot, over the lid
What do
of
you
the
mean
chulent pot.
You mean a
like
regular?
A crock. I'm not. Matthew makes a chulent, and I guess it's a crock pot. I don't really go near it, but sometimes, like if there's a lot of liquid, then I think he does sometimes lay a tea towel over the top so that it doesn't like all spill out and, first of all, like smell, because if it runs down the sides of the inner pot and then it goes onto the whatever heating element, then it will like start smelling burnt. But also just so that it doesn't all like evaporate. And he hasn't made chulent this year yet, but I think in the past that's what he's done. He's like put a tea towel over the lid.
Oh, the lid. So that's problematic. If you're sure it's a crock pot, you have to ask him. If it's a regular cold pot that's just placed on the plata, that's not a problem, because then you're covering.
It's a crock pot, because it's like an outer layer and then an inner cooking
yes,
bit.
It's a crock pot. Yes. So you
can't put a tea towel over it.
No.
Okay, thank you.
That's definitely not possible. Even before Shabbat, as we said, anything that adds heat, mosif hevel, you're not allowed to do atmana before Shabbat. So you mustn't cover it from the top. Reb Shlomo Zalman was asked, without covering the top part, only having the internal lid on the pot inside, but nothing covering it. Is that still considered atmana, or is this a panah b'miktzat? It's not fully covered from all directions, so this may not be atmana according to Ashkenazi. Sephardim definitely can't use it at all, because by them even a panah b'miktzat shema atmana. But for Ashkenazim, can they use a crock pot before Shabbat? His answer, he said yes. So think about it. It was the very last days of his life. He was very weak at the time. I think it was 2 weeks before he died. He was very weak, but he still had his mind working clearly and sharply. He thought about it, and he decided that it's Hatmana. You mustn't use it, even without covering the top, the lid. Why? Because he said, since this is a very normal way of using the crock pot, that's how normally we use it, and it's meant to always keep the food hot and even cook the food inside, and it's covered from most directions, and there's a lid on the inner pot, then that's the use of Hatmana. That's exactly what Chazal meant. They meant we shouldn't do this because we're surrounding it from all sides, making it very hot and cooking it well. So the fact that the top only has the inner lid and nothing covering it on top doesn't help. So he felt it's not allowed, but since he was, after all, weak and not 100% sure of himself, he asked for Neuvert at the time, who also has passed away already since then. Rav Neuvert wrote the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, which is the best book that has been compiled in in modern times on Hilchot Shabbat, and he was a very close student of Reb Shlomo Zalman. He asked Rav Neuvert to look into the question himself and come to him with the answer to see what he feels is this Hatmana or not. And it took him a week or two, Rav Neuvert, to come up with his conclusion. And actually, he had thought that it should be permitted, that it's not a Hatmana because the top isn't covered, so it's not all around, so it's not a Hatmana. And he had some proofs, I guess, he wrote a whole essay about it. And when he comes to Shlomo Zalman and discuss with him his conclusion, he comes to the hospital, and exactly that's when Shlomo Zalman dies. So unfortunate. He died on him before he was able to relate back to him with all the material and research he had done. So Shlomo Zalman took with him this prohibition to the grave and left us, actually, with a prohibition to use a crock pot even before Shabbat. So how do people use a crock pot, even without covering the top of it? The answer is, Rav Yoshiv allowed the following, suggested the following. Not so sure Shlomo Zalman would agree, but let's say that, let's put it this way, it's okay, definitely okay for allowing Rav Yoshiv's sack on this. And that is to lift up the inner pot so that at all times it's higher than the outer pot. How do you do that? You take some stones, not small pebbles. It has to be like a fist-sized stone. And you take 3 or 4 of them, you place it on the bottom surface of the outer pot, and only then you put the inner pot inside. So what happens? It lifts up the inner pot so that the upper sides of all around surrounding the inner pot are higher than the outer pot. You will be able to now see very obviously, as long as those stones on the bottom are high enough, so you're able to see the sides of the inner pot sticking out of the outer pot. And the moment they're sticking out, so they're definitely not surrounded from all sides, because not only the top doesn't have anything covering the lid, but even the sides, some of them are exposed, which definitely, according to Ashkenazim, would be okay. That would not be Hatmana. So in the Oral Ari Women's Shir, we spoke about this a few years ago. So we also came up with using tinfoil balls. You make tinfoil balls, again, fist size, not small, fist size balls. You make you create 3 or 4 of them. You throw them in, and only then you place the inner pot inside. And that lifts up the inner pot so that the outer part, the top sides of the inner pot are higher now, sticking out from the outer part. So that's the really the way to use the crock pot today. Not wise to do it normally, because then it could be Hatmana. Shlomo Zalman's final psak, Hatmana, you mustn't do it. Maybe if he had heard what Rav Neuvert had investigated, researched, and came to the conclusion that it's allowed, he may have backed up on his position, he may have allowed it, but we don't know. So we can't, speaking about guessing, as we did in the beginning of this year of class, we can't guess what he would say. Therefore, we have to stick to the prohibition and only lift up the inner one, such as stick out from the outer one. Okay, it may be new to you all this, but what can we do? That's the halacha that we follow. Okay, so we said we can put an egg, pre-cooked egg, into the chunt, and even if it's deep inside, all surrounded, that's okay, as long as we lift the chunt pot itself, raise it to be higher than, not to be directly on the plata, because then we're michzik in the we look like we're cooking the egg. We have to lift it up on something. Okay. Let's see if we have something else, something further to discuss by Hatmana. This we did. Okay. Actually, I think we finished one more small situation. Last situation, we finished the entire chapter of Hatmanach, Zara, Ve'ashaya. One more issue, and that is, this is also mainly done by Sfardim, because the Ashkenazim have a much easier solution for this. But we'll discuss it anyhow. It comes up actually for Ashkenazim maybe also. Let's say if you've got, again, in your cholent, you want to put something that you don't want it to touch the actual food of the cholent, but you want it to cook together with. So for Sfardim, I'll give you an example. As you may recall, we said that Sfardim don't allow pouring even boiling water into a pot, klirishon. They don't allow pouring even boiling water into it, because they consider the fact that it's in the air before it falls into the pot, the fact that it's in the air, they consider it a little cooled off, and it's not able to cook because it's left the Kli Rishon, so you can't cook with it that moment. Therefore, when it re-enters the Kli Rishon, it's like cooking, so they don't allow that. Ashkenazim allow. They allow taking a glass cup, getting out some boiling water from the urn, and pouring it into your dry cholent. You can do that on Shabbat morning, no problem. But for Sfardim who can't do that, they have a very cool technique, because sometimes our cholent evaporates. The water evaporates during the night, and in the morning you start smelling a burnt smell, so you know it's dry inside. You want to wet it. So Ashkenazi, no problem. You pour boiling water into it, all fine. Sfardim, what they do is, since they can't pour boiling water, before Shabbat, they place a bag, plastic bag, like a cookie bag or something, with water, and they tie it very well, and they place it in the cholent. Now, it's cooking the whole time the cholent is there. They have this bag of water, besides the liquid of the cholent itself. Now, Shabbat morning, if they start smelling something fishy, that it sounds to them, it smells to them as if it's something it's being burned, then they open the lid, they can poke the bag while it's in the cholent. They poke it with something sharp, a knife or something, and the water comes out of the bag into the cholent. That's fine. Boiling water, because it's been in the pot the whole night. Boiling water into a pot without having to pour it in the air, because it's already inside the pot. So for them, that's a great solution to make sure the cholent doesn't burn. But the question is, do we consider this hatmana? Because the water is surrounded by the plastic bag. That's like the pot. And now that's surrounded by the food. We said before that food within food, there's no issue of Hatmana. But here, it's food within a bag, and the bag is surrounded by food. That should be already considered Hatmana. And actually, the Mishnah Berurah holds, and that's how we hold, that a pot or any container surrounded by food is considered Hatmana if it's all surrounded from all sides. It is considered Hatmana because it's not food within food, it's the container within food. And if it's hot, so it's considered Hatmana. So in this case, would that be considered Hatmana? And then even before Shabbat, it may not be permissible because there's heat coming out from the plata, so it could be considered V'ra Mosif Heaven. The food itself is very hot, and that adds heat to the water. So it's Hatmana V'ra Mosif Heaven. Even before Shabbat, you mustn't do so. So the answer is, it's still, you may do so. You're allowed to do so. And by the way, for Ashkenazim, there's another idea, another situation that may happen like this. Some people like in their chulent that they put a bag of rice, which is tied well, and it's in the chulent. This way the rice gets hot in the chulent, but it doesn't get the chulent taste because it's surrounded by this, closed in by this, in this plastic bag. So this case again is the same question. Is this Hatmana? Because it's a bag that's surrounded by the chulent, by the boiling hot food. So it should be Hatmana. So there are 3 reasons why this is anyhow permitted. Still, you're allowed to do so. What are the 3 reasons? A, this is something Rosh Hashanah came up with. Very interesting idea. He said, what is the whole point of Hatmana that we don't allow? The point is that we don't allow a person to create heat and make sure that the food inside is kept very, very hot by surrounding it with something all around, wrapping it all around. That's the idea of Hatmana, that we don't want you to make a point out of keeping it very, very hot because you may do something wrong by adding more and turning the knob and all that. But here says Rosh Hashanah, the whole reason this water or this rice is in the chulent, sorry, not the reason it's in the chulent. The reason it's wrapped with a bag and the bag now is surrounded with food around it, the reason is not because you want to keep the rice hot, so you want it to be inside a pot, and the pot surrounded by something like a towel to keep it hot. The reason you have that plastic bag there is only for it not to mingle with the actual chulent. You don't want the taste of the chulent in the rice. Otherwise, you wouldn't care that the rice should even be open to the chulent and get it hot that way. And food within food is not a Hatmana, that's okay. The fact is a plastic bag doesn't create the situation as if it's a pot within food. It's only there to make a barrier between, a separation between the rice and the chulent, because they don't want the taste to get absorbed in the rice. Or the water, definitely, you need that bag just in order for the water not to stream all over the place. You want it to be kept in the bag so you can poke it when you need it. So it says Shlomo Zalman, this is not really a normal situation of food in a pot, and you want the whole food to become hotter and hotter. It's like food and food, and the plastic bag is just an interfere from getting the taste. It's not really a pot. That's his idea. Another reason is that there are opinions, the Chazon Ish holds, that even a pot within food is not a Hatmana. We said food within food is definitely not a Hatmana. But even a pot within food is not a Hatmana. We don't hold that way, because we hold like the Mishnah Berurah says it is, but that's another leniency to use. And finally, a plastic bag is something so thin and unimportant, it has no importance to it, that it's as if non-existent. It's as if food within food and not a pot within food. and it's only a sheer, thin plastic bag, which is really nothing. It's nullified to the food, and therefore it's considered as if it's food within food, and that's allowed. So for these three reasons, we're allowed to place a bag of food within the cholent if we wish that it should keep warm, but not get involved and connected to the cholent itself. Yes, I think this is it. Yeah, there's one thing about the yes, about the egg. Something very cute about the egg, and we'll finish with that. By the way, definitely if that bag in the cholent is a little bit exposed on the top, it's not fully dug into the cholent and covered from all sides, and according to Ashkenazim, it's anyway not a tmana. That's another fourth possibility to allow all this, to have it sticking out a little bit, which is also fine. Okay, one last thing about the egg, a cute thought that the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa had, or Moivit, we mentioned him before. He spoke about putting the egg into the cholent. What about if it's unpeeled? The egg has its shell around it still. It's a hard-boiled egg in its shell. And now you're placing it into the cholent all the way down, digging inside and covered from all sides. We said food within food is no problem. But he asked the question, but the shell is not food. The shell you don't eat. And it's surrounding the egg from all sides. Now it's like a pot. The egg is like in a pot. And the pot is now in the cholent. So it's food surrounding a pot, which according to Mishnah Berurah is not allowed. But then everyone came up with the answer that it really is not a problem. Due to what we said before with the bag, same idea. The shell is definitely not a clear vessel that contains the egg. It's nullified to the egg totally. It's worthless. It's nothing. It's not meant. It has no importance, no significance to it, and therefore it's nullified to the egg, and it's as if it's the egg directly in the cholent, food to food, and therefore it's not hatmana. Besides the Chazon Ish, we said before, who holds that if it's even a pot within food, it's not hatmana. So we have, and if you don't sink it in totally, you have a little bit of it sticking out. It's also not hatmana. All those solutions we spoke about before are also true for this egg. So it's okay, even with its shell, to dunk it into the cholent, immerse it in the cholent, and it's fine. Okay, so that's it for today. Yeah, okay, time has come up. So we finished the chapter. Next week, we'll have a very interesting chapter about receiving money, salary, payment for jobs you do on Shabbat. When are we allowed, when are we not allowed, and how can we receive payment for such things? Like our children, or whoever has old enough children, some of the kids do waitering. In Kiddushim, in events on Shabbat, they become waiters, and they get paid for it, or for the hours they do on Shabbat. So can or cannot they be paid for their work on Shabbat? And same, all kinds of such situations of getting paid for work on Shabbat. When is it and when is it not allowed to receive payment? That's going to be next week, and then that's a short chapter, and then we'll continue on. Okay, have a great remaining of the week. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Very
Bye.
well. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.